Welcome to the Hanze Procast. Today I'm joined again by a new guest, and his name is Emile Veenstra. He is a doctor living in Groningen, and he is specialized in performance optimization. And I think it's best if you introduce yourself, Emile, at the
Sure.
beginning of.
Yeah. I'm a medical doctor, and I've been so now for almost 4 years. And about like a year ago, I've been starting a company that deals with optimizing performance of athletes, athletes of all genders, ages, both long, short term, so triathletes to bodybuilders. Specifically, I focus on bodybuilding and strength sports because I do that as well. I've bodybuilded for many years. I did powerlifting for many years. And I was always busy trying to think of smart ways to increase my performance, supplements, vitamins, and all that stuff. Um, and I've noticed there was a need for a medical doctor to assist athletes in this, and I've been doing that ever since. Now full time, since a month, I'm doing this full time. I have my own company as well, and that's what I do.
Very nice. We're gonna link
Sure.
you in the description, of course, and
Cool.
get you out here because I think it's very nice what you do. I'm a big fan of blood work and advocate of doing it because if you do sports at a certain level or you are ambitious to do it at a certain level, you
Mhm.
definitely need to take care of yourself and need to know where you're going.
Sure.
And so you said you're into optimizing athletes and performance.
hmm
So
hmm
how are you going to approach this? For example, if we're talking about an athlete, you said you're from bodybuilding, I can really relate to this. Um, what are the first levers you would turn over, and what are
Sure.
the first things you would apply?
All right. So when somebody comes to me, it depends what kind of sport they do. But let's say we take a bodybuilder who's going into a bodybuilding competition. Um, we need to do a few things. First, we got to know, is this person using like performance enhancing drugs? That is something we need to know because that changes the whole operative. But let's say they don't.
Yes.
They're a natural bodybuilder. Um, they're gonna be in a large deficit of calories for a prolonged period of time, and this changes quite some stuff inside of the body, especially the hormonal part is important with natural bodybuilders. um, Testosterone goes down the moment you lower the calories. Besides that, the thyroid function goes down. And the funny thing is, for a bodybuilder, having lower testosterone and especially having lower thyroid means that you're going to have more trouble. The lower you go with your fat percentage, you're going to have more trouble getting your metabolism up, keeping the muscle on. So there are some ways to improve that, but also we need to keep that in check if it's like healthy at all. So a well-placed blood test can give some insights in how low are we getting, and should we do something about it? Is it okay? Do you feel okay? Well, generally, if you're a natural bodybuilding, it's going to suck. You know that as well, and that's okay. If you're willing to do so, that's good. But optimizing nutrition, optimizing the supplements you take can make a significant difference. And there are some supplements that can help retain testosterone levels, unless until a certain level. What I've seen is if you keep the fat relatively high, then you can withstand lower calorie deficits before your testosterone starts to tank as well. So you can keep it up a little bit longer. Testosterone is formed out of cholesterol, and cholesterol is made everywhere in your body, but we need some fats for that to happen. And the moment your fats are really, really low, cholesterol production goes down as well. So if we can keep the fats a little bit high, then sure, that's really nice. The problem is if you're a bodybuilder and you're going to a large deficit, you rather want to cut out the fats because you need the carbs to train still hard. There's a balance that needs to be going by having enough carbs to still perform in the gym. And with some timing, you can get the carbs around your training and then still perform. But then the other, like the breakfast and the dinners, I generally put in a little bit higher fat to still have some fats in your body, but the fats are going to take some calories as well. So then no carbs in the evening or in the morning. That is one way to like play around with this and make sure that people stay healthier for a longer period of time.
So you would say
Sure.
the fat level is the most important when it comes to controlling maybe a weight cut. If we take a weight cut now in bodybuilding, but weight cuts also happen in other sports, for example, if you look to fighting, so they also drain themselves to make the weight. So fat is the real adjuster in that sense when it comes to hormones.
Yeah. That is, I think, the number one thing. What I see with clients is the moment they start dropping their fats too low, then we see the testosterone tank really hard. And if we can keep that up a little bit longer, they can have a better pre-competition engagement, is what I see. But if you go really deep, and especially for bodybuilders, yeah, it's going to suck the last 4-6 weeks. But in other sports, there are a whole lot of sports where you need to really hit a low body weight, rowing as well, and the same rules apply there. So how many fats do you want to hit? I would say about 10% of your total caloric intake. So let's say you have 3,000, then you want to have at least 300 calories of fats, especially in the later phases. That is a little bit what I gauge upon.
Okay, so if we maybe line out some negative effects that would appear if these hormones get out of order. So probably one will be mood, as if I'm speaking from experience here, how I felt like you get triggered quite fast and you fall into these more impulse behaviors, I would say. So it's
Yeah, mood is a big one. And I don't know a bodybuilder that's 2 weeks before his competition and that is not the happiest guy in the world. You still seem to smile as well 2 weeks before your competition, but other things are things like libido, quality of your erections, also muscle retention or muscle gain goes down, of course, the moment your testosterone tanks, and your sleep quality may go down as well. This is not very well known, but we do understand that a low testosterone level can impact quality of sleep as well. And I think those are the most prominent ones. Another thing is testosterone is really important for the creation of red blood cells for your erythrocytes. And if your testosterone goes down, then the production of red blood cells goes down as well. And this is reflected when you do blood tests in your hematocrit. Well, your hematocrit can be normal for male and female, it can be too high. Is a bad thing generally. It can be lowered or too low as well. And a low testosterone is associated with a lower hematocrit as well. We need red blood cells to transport oxygen in our blood. If you have less red blood cells, less oxygen will be transported, which will have a direct negative consequence on your sport performance as well. These things are all related.
That's very important to keep in mind that testosterone also impacts those levels of performance, not only generally the power output or the muscle gain. So for me, when looking at supplements, for example, so we talked about fat stimulating and regulating, but I know that zinc applies also on the hormonal basis, and it also therefore impacts, for example, testosterone. But maybe you can also put into words how exactly this is done.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, if you look at the studies, we know that people with zinc deficiencies, they often have lower testosterone as well. And the moment we put them on zinc supplements, they have higher testosterone levels again, or they go back to normal. Let me put it like that. The real reason how it works is, as far as I know, we don't really understand yet. Like zinc and magnesium and a lot of these minerals, they have an essential role to play in a lot of the enzymatic processes that needs to be done by forming hormones. So we start off from a cholesterol molecule that is being transformed into a pregnenolone molecule. Then it gets into another one and another one. And through all kinds of intermediaries, we eventually end up with the testosterone molecule. And then every step from one molecule to another is transformed by several enzymes. And the creation of these enzymes, there are other processes for that to create these enzymes. And if you have a lack of these enzymes, then the transformation of one form of hormone to another form of hormone can be lowered as well. So we need to have enough of these enzymes. Oftentimes, enzymes, they need certain minerals to operate well. Now, I cannot tell you which enzyme zinc is responsible for, but we know that zinc is probably used in some of these enzymes to be upregulated. So less zinc, less of these enzymes. And we see the same with magnesium as well. As far as I know, we don't really know which specific enzyme it is. That is a little bit what the case is here. Eventually, we have testosterone, and testosterone can be transformed into estrogen for males, but also into DHT. We need testosterone, we need DHT, we also need estrogen. And for that, there are enzymes as well. And these enzymes need certain minerals as well. Now, when do you get into a zinc deficiency? That is not normal. Well, it has to do with diet, or it has to do with certain genetic differences in people. You don't know until you are deficient in something. Would it be good to test it? Well, I don't know. Not as a standard thing. I wouldn't test zinc or magnesium. But if you're a high-level athlete and you train a lot, so you exert yourself a lot, you have a lot of competitions, you're under a lot of stress. But also you need to hit body weight goals. We talked about boxing, powerlifting, bodybuilding, but also other body weight related classes of sports, for example, rowing. If you're limited in the amount of calories you can eat because you need to be a certain weight, then quality of the diet often goes down. What I see a lot is people stop eating nuts, stop eating fruits, they stop eating vegetables, or they reduce it to such a low level that if that goes on for a longer period of time, we're talking months and years, then eventually a relative deficiency of one of these minerals can occur. So if you're that type of athlete, sure, yeah, let's test it, let's see it for what it is, and then maybe we can supplement it. If you don't have a deficiency, does it then actually help to take zinc or take magnesium to increase your testosterone? The science, as far as I know it, is a little bit in doubt of that. Some people seem to increase their testosterone levels for a bit, and some don't have normal zinc levels. So if you go from normal zinc levels to a little bit higher normal zinc levels, will that increase your testosterone? I don't know. Could be. Will the increase of testosterone, will that be relevant? Let's say a normal testosterone range is from 8 to 32 nanomole per liter.
Okay.
All right. Let's say I test you and we have 15 for you. All right, 15, you feel good, you're doing great. Okay, you start dieting, you start training really hard, and I supplement you with zinc. All right, maybe the zinc does something. Okay, now we don't have 15 testosterone, but we have 16 or 17 or 18. Will that actually increase performance? I don't know. This might be really subclinical, these little differences. And you have to take into account as well, like testosterone fluctuates over the day a lot. So if I test you now at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the next day or the next week after some zinc supplementation, you get tested, you draw your blood at 11, 1 hour later, then it's already hard to compare whether the zinc actually increased your testosterone or just because you measured an hour later, your testosterone is a little bit different. So I think what I'm trying to say here is this is difficult. And it's hard for me to say, take some zinc, even if you're not deficient, and you're going to be, this is going to be great and you're going to feel better. Probably not. But if you're a high level athlete, take the zinc, take 50 milligrams of zinc, just do it. You want to push out everything you can. You're on the cutting edge, and please do so. You can go to 100 milligrams as well. I would use the zinc picolinate form that seems to be in the studies. It seems to be to have the highest biological availability. There might be some other more expensive forms that are better, but this seems to be fine and well researched. Yeah, you can try, and that would be my advice.
Yeah. Interesting to hear this connection. You also mentioned magnesium in there, and you spoke specifically on the testosterone involvement now. For zinc, for example, it's involved in many processes. Now, after this very detailed explanation, actually, of how zinc applies in the body, maybe move onwards to the more essential things in my regard, for example, things I really lean on, which are creatine, omega-3, as well as vitamin D. Those are very important things, I would say, especially living where we live and eating the diet that we typically eat here in the Western Hemisphere. So maybe you can give your opinion also on those.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think every person should take creatine, non-athlete or athlete. We have so much studies on this, like at least 500 studies right now. Athletes and way more on the general population. Not only does it seem to increase your anaerobic work capacity, but it also seems to be potentially beneficial in some cognitive diseases, for example, Alzheimer. It might do something with inflammatory diseases, like certain infectious diseases. So that's really interesting. Generally, it's dosed for 5 grams per day. I think that is fine. Some people do a build-up phase and they go in higher dosages. If you're not tight on time, I wouldn't do it, because if you're going to build up, then you can speed up the process before you hit, between air quotes, optimal levels in your muscle. So that is one thing. Creatine is a natural occurring product in the muscles. It gets produced in the liver and in the brain, and we take about 50%. We get it from our own production, and 50% we get it out of food. But generally, you can optimize it by taking creatine monohydrate is what I would do, 5 grams per day. It influences muscle hypertrophy, not directly, but indirectly by the fact that you can exert yourself more during training. And it also increases the cellular volume of the muscle, because the creatine attaches to water as well. And we know from muscles, if their diameter increases through whatever reason, their potential capacity of doing work is increased as well. So that might be another reason why you would be stronger because of creatine, just because of mechanical reasons, because the muscle is bigger in diameter. So creatine would absolutely be a supplement for any athlete in that sense. It seems to also help a little bit with injury prevention. There are some studies that show this, that it helps with dehydration, or the frequency of dehydration. Also, muscle cramps are a little bit less. And we often see with people that use creatine, although we don't really know why, is that they report less injuries as well related to their sporting activities. So that would be another reason to take creatine. Sometimes I have the discussion, hey, do you need to time it? Do I need to time it before a competition, or do I need to time it before a training? It doesn't seem to be that case. It doesn't matter where on the day you take it, because eventually it's not about the creatine in your stomach or the creatine in your blood. It's about the creatine levels in your muscle. And those seem to be pretty stable after about 5 or 6 weeks of steady intake of 5 grams of creatine per day.
Okay. For me, it's always 24 hours. As long as I get my 5 grams in, I think I'm fine.
There you go.
I usually did it with the pre-workout before training in the gym.
Mhm.
Sometimes I also, when I'm not training, I do it in the mornings. Another supplement, for example, omega-3 fatty acids, one of my favorite general supplements. Maybe you can give us a
Absolutely.
rundown as well.
Yeah. So if we talk about fatty acids, we have generally saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. And we know from studies that people that eat more saturated fats compared to unsaturated fats, they are generally unhealthier and have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. So limiting your amount of fatty acids is great for general health. But then we have some long-chain unsaturated fatty acids, which are omega-3. And then we're especially interested in the EPA and DHA. Those are the 2 types that we're interested in. And the studies show that an intake of old research showed that 200 milligrams of both is fine, but I am inclined now to at least have 1 gram to an optimal of 2 grams, or maybe even higher, because there seems to be a dose response relationship. Like higher dose means lower cardiovascular disease risk, but also better cholesterol, etc., etc. So at least 1 or 2 grams. Now, this doesn't need to be mistaken for fish oil, because only about half or a third of fish oil is omega-3. So if I advise you to take 1 or 2 grams of EPA and DHA, I think 1 is fine for the general public. That means about 3 to 6 grams of fish oil. You can take it as a supplement, but the thing is, I find omega-3 supplements generally to be pretty expensive, especially if you want to take it at least with a gram. Most omega-3 supplements are relatively underdosed. So what you can do is, an alternative is that you just eat fatty food or fatty fish food. So that's mackerel, or that it's salmon. Well, those are generally pretty expensive as well, but depending on where you live in the world, that might be less expensive than taking fish oil supplements. And in that case, I would aim for about 90 to 170 grams of fatty fish per day.
Per day.
Yeah. And what we see is there seems to be a misunderstanding about omega-3 and omega-6. Generally, we say omega-3. The old thought was omega-3 lowers inflammation in the body and omega-6 heightens it. But I think we now know that that is not true. A relative relationship between omega-3 and 6 is not so important. It doesn't really matter what you get into it. It's predominantly about the omega-3s. I think a way more interesting discussion is how do you get those omega-3s in? If it's through fish oil or a krill oil supplement, that seems to be fine, but there are many food sources as well that have omega-3. I'd rather have you eat that than take the pills.
Okay. Aside from the fatty fish options, what are other options that maybe you could name?
Sure. Some cheaper options are several nuts. If you Google omega-3 and nuts, you'll find which nuts have the highest degree of omega-3. What you can also investigate is chia seeds or lijnzaad in Dutch, but I forgot the English name. Flaxseed. Thank you. Thank you to my wife. Those would be some cheap and really well-rounded option with the added benefit is not only some healthy fats, but also increasing your fiber intake, which is another thing that we're not really thinking about that. Generally, what I see with the people that I treat or coach is that they generally have low fiber intakes, which is unhealthy in the long term, and increasing that has many beneficial properties. So that will be a great way to increase not only your omega-3s but also to increase your fiber intake by nuts and by these seeds.
Okay, so more nuts and seeds, or is it also possible to nut butter in an example? If you make a breakfast in the morning and you put peanut butter in it.
Yeah, I would generally limit eating peanuts. Because the amount of omega-3 or the amount of unsaturated fats is relatively low compared to other nuts. Now we're talking about oils. I'm a big fan of avocado oil to cook in. It seems to be really resistant to heat. Technically, it's a fruit oil, but it has a really high density of unsaturated fatty acids, and therefore I like it a lot. It is, again, a little bit more on the pricier side, but generally, if you go lower, then I always would use olive oil. Seems to be doing fine. But peanut butter, I would limit peanut butter intake just because the amount of unsaturated fat is quite a little bit lower than most other nuts. There are better nuts out there. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so more walnut is usually the go-to. If I buy some nuts for quark or any other meal, it's usually the walnuts.
Sure. At the end of the day, let's say you take 200 calories and you take that in some form of sugar, as in a sauce, and you replace that with 200 calories of the fats that you get from peanut butter, then I would say that's a netto increase. That's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Can you then also make another positive step into a better nut? Yeah, you can do that. But there's levels of optimization in here. Yeah. So it depends on where you're coming from and what you substituted from. Yeah.
At least have some component of nut in there, but
absolutely.
Like jello.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think that's the message. That's great. Yeah.
The other supplement that I think is also very important for many reasons as well as performance is vitamin D. I would say naturally you could already speak of a deficiency just from the location we live in. We don't get enough sunlight through the day. We also usually work inside.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to always keep in mind with vitamin D is the liver toxicity that may be a result of wrong dosages. Maybe you can give us like a small guide.
Yeah. So vitamin D is really interesting. It's a little bit different than most other vitamins, as vitamin D is actually way more similar to steroid hormones like estrogen and testosterone. It has the same base. So it's made from the cholesterol molecule again. This also means that its function is a little bit different. Normally, vitamin D is made active through exposure of UV on the skin. Part is done in the kidneys as well. And as you said, most people have low vitamin D levels because we're just not outside as much, especially here in the Netherlands. Even if you're outside a lot, it still wouldn't matter much because I think about 7 months a year, the stance of the sun is so low that even if you would be outside naked and dance around all day, the amount of UV is just not enough because it gets filtered out through the sky. So that is one thing to take into account. I generally advise everybody to take vitamin D, regardless of who they are, what they are, how old they are. Higher dosages general for people that have an ethnic background, so they're not white, have a darker skin color, or the hijab or something that covers them from the sun in general. These people have even lower vitamin D levels, but pretty high dosages of vitamin D can be tolerated. How do we know that? Well, I think the last 4 years, we had several studies that said, hey, the daily allowance of vitamin D is, I think, about 400 units, I think. So 400 units of vitamin D should be enough to make sure that the level of vitamin D in the blood is sufficient for people not to have the rachitis or the English bone disease. So when vitamin D gets so incredibly low, it does something with the bone metabolism. So vitamin D goes too low, the bones get fragile, you get osteoporosis, bones can break or can bend. This is a bad thing. We don't often see this anymore because most people have not such low vitamin D. But when do you see it? Well, with people that have really bad diets, because you can get some vitamin D through vegetables and through meat. But you also see it with athletes. And I remember I used to do like a rotation for med school with one of the largest football clubs here in the Netherlands. So these are young kids, incredibly talented, outside all day because they play football. And then we measured their vitamin D, and half of the people were close to the English bone disease line. And these people had really nice diets as well, and they had a chef and everything. So what I'm saying is everybody needs vitamin D. I would supplement it for everyone. And then the question is, yeah, the dose. 400 is too low. That is what we know. But what is high enough? Well, if we look at people that are outside all day, for example, construction workers in the Mediterranean, they're outside all day. And then we see there is a maximum amount of vitamin D that gets produced. It doesn't go higher than that. So your normal production has a natural limit. And that natural limit seems to be about 200 nanomoles. The English bone disease line is about 30 nanomoles, if I remember it correctly. And generally, what is called healthy is 60. Now, I would argue that being closer to that 200 line is more optimal because that resembles at least the maximum production your body will allow than the 60. Do we have studies saying that 200 is better than 60? No, that's really hard. But this is just my point of view.
I can only agree with that perspective that you have. If 200 is like proven to be where the line is for still the good benefits, because if it's getting above that and you start to have negative effects, then obviously it shouldn't be crossed. But if there's no dosage related impact on the body that's negative between 60 and 200, it's a no-brainer, I think, to go there. But the question is, if I look at the supplements that I use, for example, they're always declared on the back with international units. You mentioned the 400 is the recommended dose. So
yeah,
or
I
like
think 400 or 800. Yeah,
the minimum dose that every human should have. So does it also apply like with the nanograms? Then it's about 6.5 times the 400, so around 3,000 units a day. Or
sure.
how much would you recommend? Because for me, I think I'm taking 5,000 a day. So
yeah. What I advise is people to use at least 5,000 or 6,000 a day, and in some cases, I go up to 10,000. We have studies that have given people 10,000 units a day for a very long period of time, and there were any adverse events at all. So I deem 10,000 units to be safe. Generally, most people with 5,000 or 6,000, they get to about 80 or 90 or 100 nanomole. You can go way higher. So 10,000 is safe as well, but generally I would say 5,000 is fine. Can you go too high? Yeah, absolutely. But if I look at the cases described in the literature, then these are really rare events that people actually get a toxic dose of vitamin D. And those are generally like insanely high dosages. We're not talking about 10,000 units a day. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and thousands of units of vitamin D for a prolonged period of time. And I think you're fine with anything between 5 or 10,000. I would be on the 5,000 side if you're a lighter person in skin color, but also in weight. Girls, 5,000 is fine as well. If you're a larger adult male, especially if your skin color is a little bit darker, then I would prefer to go to the 10,000 units.
Okay, so melatonin also has an impact on the vitamin D metabolism
Absolutely.
or
Absolutely.
uptake? Okay. So
Yeah, it's about transforming an inactive form of vitamin D to an active form, and that is done through UV exposure on the skin. And less UV exposure gets through to the skin if the melatonin is high. So that you have correct, yeah. So you just need to take that into account, and I prescribe higher dosages for people with darker skin. Yeah.
so those are the three supplements I would deem, and you also I think would deem essential in the forms you can afford and have your hands on, because at least working into that direction is a positive thing, I would say. The start of
Mm-hmm.
optimization with the tools at your disposal.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other things that you would like, maybe if you could give us two or your three favorite other things to deploy as a supplement or intervention with like a client? Maybe some insider info
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I can think of a lot. I think what would be number 4 on my list, if you're talking about sport performance, I would aim to explore beta alanine. This seems to help with, everything above like 12 to 15 reps to like a few minutes of exercise. Or maybe it's less applicable for a power lifter, but it's more applicable for most like tennis or American football, stuff like that. There's quite a body of research showing that there's some benefits to it. The only negative is you get paresthesia of the skin, so it might flush a bit, tingly sensation, but that can be minimized by dividing the dose over the day, or there are slow release beta alanine supplements as well. And beta alanine is not a doping thing as well, so it's just as great. You can just get it. It's legal in that sense.
If you would take me, for example, I weigh 100 kilos right now. How would you dose me on beta alanine? Just to give an example. So let's go for football with
Yeah.
frame.
Yeah. What we know from the studies is that the range of dosages are about 3 to 6 grams. And as you are a male and you're on the heavier side, as you have a lot of muscle, I would probably start with 5 or 6 grams per day and then just see what the effect is. And might need to be that we split it up, because otherwise your face will feel all warpy, all funny. So I would probably start with splitting it up and then see how it goes from there.
Okay, because that's one thing I noticed. I usually took them in combination with like 3 in the gym, so it was just a
Mm-hmm.
tingly workout. But if you spread it, it's probably easier for the body to handle.
Absolutely. And another thing is, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, then I would say beta alanine might be even number 3 on the list, because they generally have lower levels of carnosine, which beta alanine upregulates. Carnosine is a pH regulator in the muscle cells, and vegans and vegetarians have lower levels of that. So they can be helped more by taking beta alanine than people that actually eat meat and get generally have already an intake of beta alanine.
Okay, so it's there again from the meat deficiency.
Yeah, you already said caffeine, right?
Yeah, I mentioned caffeine,
Uh,
mostly in the form of like coffee or well tea in some form, but for me it's rather more the energy drink or pre-workout type.
yeah, we can go multiple ways. I think what I would go for is maybe sodium bicarbonate, especially if you do longer endurance exercises. There seems to be some evidence for that. And it's not a doping substance, so you're free to take it. It does a little bit the same as beta alanine. And it seems to be there's some research saying that the combination of beta alanine with sodium bicarbonate has an even stronger effect than just beta alanine on its own. So sodium bicarbonate, which is just baking powder, this one you need to take before you do the training, about like 60 to 90 minutes, sometimes a little bit more. Why so long, or why then? Yeah, in some cases, people get a little bit of gastrointestinal distress because of it by taking it. And you don't want to have that during your race or during your exercise. So then prolonging the time before you, from the moment you take it until the training or until the competition, can help with that a little bit. But before you do this, please try it out on a normal day. before you experiment with this stuff. So that might be a good option 5. Yeah.
Okay.
If we're talking about sport performance. Yeah.
Yeah. Plain baking powder, dissolve it in
Pretty much.
water, and then how many grams did you say? Like, is it a tablespoon, half a tablespoon, 2 grams, 4 grams?
Oh, it's really bound to your body weight. We know that about 0.3 grams per kilogram is advised. So if you're a 100-kilo male, then that would be about 300 grams or 30 grams. I mean,
30 grams. Yeah. Okay. Well, I would like to, for example, also talk about L-citrulline, which is also another supplement I'm a big great fan
Sure.
of, especially from bodybuilding.
Sure. The problem with L-citrulline is that we don't really have studies showing increased performance. So all the stuff that I said, creatine, beta-alanine, and sodium bicarbonate, they have studies backing them up, showing that they actually increase the amount of reps you do, the exertion you can do, your work capacity. For citrulline, it's less strong. Does it vasodilate? Yeah, sure, it does that. Can it give a nice feeling? Sure, that does it too. But I don't think we have robust studies yet describing positive effects on working capacity or sport performance.
Okay. Also, when looking at the supplements, it's one thing to mention. I think that some companies play with the labels. So you always have the citrulline malate formulations, which are rather like 2:1 or 3:1 ratios. So I think when trying out citrulline or wanting to use it, because it, well, as we said, vasodilates and it has some effect on the body as well, it's important to buy, or like at least to dose correctly then.
Yeah. And I think if I would like to end off with something that is have a critical look at your own diet. If through whatever reason your diet is not optimal, you're not taking your vegetables, you're not taking your fruits, you eat the same thing over and over again, or maybe you're vegan or vegetarian, maybe you're celiac. Like if you're in that category, then there might be some deficiencies related, especially if you're vegan. We're talking about iron, we're talking about calcium, maybe zinc deficiency as well with these people. Take that into account. If you have a really good diet, then of course creatine can help, beta-alanine can help, sodium bicarbonate can help, but deficiencies in minerals are probably less probable. So take that into account, make a critical appraisal of how your diet is. And if you want to improve your sport performance, then that might lead you a little bit to where you can actually make the next steps.
Okay. I think that's a great way to end it. I would say there might be some people who are interested in your services. So if anyone is interested in performance optimization, maybe also blood work evaluation, and thereby specific optimizations, I think you are a great person to approach in that regard. And I am very thankful that you were on here today and shared your knowledge with us. I wish you a great evening.
Sweet. Thanks. You too. Yeah. And if people want to follow me, I have an Instagram account, which is Freyer_medical. Maybe you can include it in the screen.
Yes.
I also have a telephone number you can send your WhatsApp messages to if you have questions or if you'd like to get in touch for consultancies, ideas, or blood test monitoring.